The morning my father told me he wouldn't come to my wedding, I didn't cry. Not right away. Instead, I stared at my reflection in the tiny bathroom mirror of my apartment in Savannah, Georgia, mascara wand frozen halfway to my eyelashes, while my best friend Jenna sat on the counter watching my face like a trauma nurse waiting for the heart monitor to flatline. My phone was still pressed against my ear. "Sweetheart," my dad said, voice tight like he'd rehearsed it. "Your sister's baby shower starts at noon, and with the drive your mother and I just don't think we can make it." 8 seconds. That's how long silence can feel like a lifetime. "You promised?" I finally said. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. "I know," he said quickly, "but this is Claire's first baby. These moments matter." I looked down at the dress hanging from the closet door. Vintage lace. Ivory. Something I'd found in a thrift boutique and had altered with money I saved from freelance illustration work. "This is my wedding day, Dad." "I know, honey." Another pause. Then the sentence that broke something permanent inside me. "You'll have other moments." I hung up. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Jenna didn't ask what happened. She already knew. She slid off the counter, grabbed the mascara from my hand, and started applying it herself like we were in some weird emergency makeover show. "Okay," she said calmly. "Blink." I blinked. "You're still getting married today?" "I know." "You still love Ivan?" "With my entire soul." "Then nothing else matters." She said it like a doctor delivering a diagnosis. But the truth was it did matter. Because my father wasn't just skipping brunch. He was skipping walking his daughter down the aisle. My family had always revolved around my sister, Claire Mitchell, older by 3 years, blonde perfect. Instagram, ready since the MySpace era. If our family was a solar system, Claire was the sun. Everyone else just orbited. My dad, Thomas Mitchell, had spent 30 years working at a regional bank in Atlanta, stable, practical, the kind of man who believed real jobs involved suits and spreadsheets. My mom, Linda, ran a book club, hosted backyard barbecues, and cared deeply about appearances. And Claire married rich. 5 years ago she married Ryan Callahan, a commercial real estate developer whose family owned half of downtown Buckhead. The wedding looked like something straight out of Vogue weddings. 300 guests, champagne fountains, ice sculptures. Meanwhile, I was the artsy younger sister who drew illustrations for children's books and lived in a renovated warehouse apartment. To my parents, that made me adorable. But not serious. Then I met Evan. I met Evan Carter at an art festival in Charleston. He was standing in front of one of his own paintings. A huge oil portrait of a woman reading on a fire escape in Brooklyn. Staring at it like it had personally offended him. I laughed. He turned around. And I swear to God something shifted in the air. "Bad painting?" I asked. He shook his head. "Almost good." That was Evan. Quiet, honest, brutally talented. He was a painter, contemporary realism, portraits, urban landscapes. The kind of work that made gallery owners lean closer. But my family, they just heard the word artist and translated it to unemployed. Thanksgiving dinner. 8 months before the wedding. That was the night everything started. I brought Evan to my parents' house in Alpharetta. Claire showed up in a brand new Range Rover, carrying 2 bottles of wine and announcing loudly, $200 each. Napa. I brought a homemade pecan pie. Guess which one my mom displayed like a trophy on the dining table? Over turkey. My dad leaned across the table toward Evan. "So," he said with a smile that wasn't really a smile, "when are you planning on getting a real job?" Ryan laughed. Claire tilted her head sympathetically. "At least Emma has someone," she said. "Emma. That's me." Evan said nothing. He just reached under the table and squeezed my hand. But here's the part no one knew. Not my parents. Not Claire. Not even me. Evan had just finished a painting for a new client. A client our landlord had introduced him to. At the time, it seemed like a small thing. Just another commission, but that painting would change everything. Our landlord, his name was Arthur Bennett. 68 years old, gray hair, corduroy jackets, always drinking black coffee. He owned the old Victorian building where Evan and I rented our studio apartment for $900 a month. Ridiculously cheap for Savannah. When I asked why the rent was so low, He shrugged. I like artists better than accountants. He often wandered downstairs while Evan painted. Sometimes he'd stand quietly behind him and say things like, "Push the light warmer on the jawline." Evan would adjust the brushstroke, and suddenly the painting would come alive. One afternoon Arthur said something strange. "Your work reminds me of someone I used to represent," he told Evan. "Ooh?" Evan asked. Arthur shrugged. "Someone who sells for 6 figures now. We thought he was just being nice. We were wrong." Evan proposed in January. No ring, just the two of us lying on the studio floor surrounded by canvases. "Marry me?" he asked quietly. I said yes before he even finished the sentence. We planned a small garden wedding in Savannah. 40 guests. Wildflowers. A wooden arch Evan built himself. Nothing fancy. But it was ours. When I called my parents with the date, June 14th, my dad's response was, "Let me check the calendar." 2 days later he called back. "I'll be there," he said. "I'll walk you down the aisle." I believed him. 3 weeks before the wedding my Aunt Carol called. "Sweetheart," she said, "are you going to Claire's shower too?" "What shower?" "The baby shower." June 14th. At the country club. My stomach dropped. Wait, what? Same day, same time. An hour and a half away. Claire had scheduled her baby shower on my wedding day, and when I confronted her, she said the sentence that would echo in my head for months. "You can have a wedding anytime, Emma. This is my first baby." The RSVPs out of 40 family members, 22 declined. Every single one attending Claire's baby shower. My mom told me maybe I could postpone a few weeks. My dad stopped returning texts. Claire posted party decorations on Instagram, and the night before the wedding I sent one final message to the family group chat. Just the details. Time, address, directions, and one sentence. "I hope to see you there." No one replied. June 14th, 2:15 p.m. The garden venue was beautiful. 42 white chairs lined the grass, lavender tied to each one. From a distance it looked like a fairy tale wedding. Up close, 35 of those chairs were empty. 7 people came. 7. I stood at the end of the aisle alone. No father, no mother, no sister. Just silence and empty seats. The music started. I was about to walk alone, when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate. A deep voice spoke. "Well, I suppose I'm overdressed for a garden wedding." I turned around, and there stood Arthur Bennett, our quiet old landlord, wearing a navy 3-piece suit. He held out his arm. "If you'll allow an old man the honor." My chest cracked open. "Your father should be here," he said softly, "but since he isn't, someone who values you should be." I took his arm, and together, we started walking down the aisle, but what I didn't know yet was that the quiet man walking beside me had already changed the course of my entire life, and in a few weeks, my family would realize exactly what they had walked away from. The moment the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," I heard someone in the back row quietly whisper, "Well, this might be the most intimate wedding I've ever attended." Everyone laughed, softly, kindly, because when you only have 7 guests, everyone hears everything. And honestly, I was okay with that. Because the man I had just married, Ivan Carter, kissed me like the empty chairs didn't exist. Like the world had shrunk down to just the two of us. But the truth? Those empty chairs still burned. Every time the breeze moved through the garden, it rattled the white folding seats my parents should have been sitting in. Seats that still had their lavender bundles tied neatly to the sides. Seats that looked like quiet accusations. After the ceremony, the officiant clapped his hands together. "Well, let's celebrate the newest married couple in Georgia." Our tiny crowd cheered. 7 voices. Jenna popped open a bottle of champagne she'd hidden in her purse like a smuggler. "Classy wedding favors," she said, handing out plastic cups. Arthur Bennett raised his glass first. "To love," he said. Then he looked directly at Evan. "And to recognizing talent when you see it." Evan smiled politely. But something about the way Arthur said that made my stomach tighten with curiosity. Because Arthur had been saying strange things like that for months, and every time he did, Evan would give him a look that said, "Not now." I didn't know what that meant yet. We didn't have a ballroom. No DJ. No ice sculptures, just a little patio behind the garden venue where the caterer had set up a buffet of southern comfort food. Fried chicken, mac and cheese, cornbread, peach cobbler. Honestly, it smelled better than any fancy country club dinner. Jenna grabbed a plate and sighed dramatically. Your sister's probably eating quinoa salad at that baby shower. Good, I said. More fried chicken for me, Arthur chuckled. Then he turned to Evan again. So, he said casually, did the gallery call this morning? Evan nearly dropped his fork. Arthur? What gallery? I asked. Evan rubbed the back of his neck. It's nothing. Just a conversation. Arthur raised an eyebrow. A conversation with New York's fastest-growing contemporary gallery. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Wait, what? Evan shot Arthur a look, but Arthur just leaned back in his chair like a man enjoying a very good story. You didn't tell her. Arthur. Tell me what? I said. Evan sighed. Then he reached across the table and took my hand. You remember that commission Arthur asked me to do a few months ago? The portrait. Yeah. Arthur sipped his champagne. Well, he said calmly, that portrait happened to be for an old friend of mine. Oh, I asked. Arthur smiled. Margaret Holloway. The name meant nothing to me, but Evan's eyes widened. You told her, Evan said. Arthur shrugged. She's your wife now. She should know. I looked between them. Someone please explain what's happening. Arthur set his glass down. Margaret Holloway owns Holloway Contemporary in Manhattan. I blinked. Still nothing, Jenna gasped. Oh my God. What? I said. She leaned toward me like she was revealing government secrets. That gallery sells paintings for like insane money. Arthur nodded. The portrait Evan painted. Margaret bought it for 45,000. My brain short-circuited. 45,000. Evan winced. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Arthur continued casually. And that was just the first one. My heart started pounding. What do you mean first one? Arthur smiled like a man unveiling a surprise. Margaret has invited Evan to show 12 pieces in a private exhibition in Manhattan next month. The table went silent. Except for Jenna, who whispered one word. Holy? Evan squeezed my hand. It's not guaranteed anything will sell. Arthur laughed. Oh, my boy, you have no idea? Later that evening, when the sun started dipping behind the trees, Jenna handed me my phone. You should probably look at this. I hadn't checked social media all day. Honestly, I'd been afraid to, but curiosity won. I opened Instagram, and there it was, Claire's baby shower, a giant balloon arch, pink roses, custom cookies shaped like baby bottles. The caption read, surrounded by the people who truly love me today. My throat tightened. The photo showed my parents smiling proudly beside her, Ryan holding her belly. Dozens of relatives, all dressed beautifully, all celebrating, all absent from my wedding. Then I noticed something. A comment from my mom. Best day ever. Jenna watched my face carefully. You okay? I locked the phone. Yeah, I said quietly, but I wasn't. Because for a moment, I wondered if my family would even realize what they missed today. The surprise around sunset. Arthur pulled Evan aside. They spoke quietly for a few minutes. Then Evan came back to me with a strange look on his face. What? I asked. Arthur clapped his hands. Well, he said loudly. I suppose it's time. For what? Jenna asked. Arthur pointed toward the driveway. A long black SUV had just pulled up. A woman stepped out. Tall, elegant, silver hair in a sleek bun, designer sunglasses. She walked toward us with the confidence of someone used to entering rooms where people paid attention. Arthur grinned. Emma, he said. Meet Margaret Holloway, the gallery owner. From New York. The woman buying Evan's paintings. She reached out and shook my hand. Congratulations on your wedding, she said warmly. Thank you. She turned to Evan. I apologize for arriving unannounced. Then she smiled. But when Arthur told me what happened with your family today, I decided something. Evan frowned. What? Margaret looked at both of us. I think your honeymoon should start early. I blinked. What do you mean? She pulled an envelope from her purse. Inside were 2 plane tickets. First class, Savannah to Paris. Departure tomorrow morning. My heart nearly stopped. Wait, what? Margaret smiled. Artists need inspiration. Consider it an investment. I stared at the tickets, then at Evan. Then back at Margaret. But we can't accept something like this. Arthur laughed. Oh, you absolutely can. Margaret nodded. And when you return, Evan's exhibition will be ready. My mind spun. Paris, first class, art exhibition. This didn't feel real. But the craziest part. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed again. A new message in the family group chat. From Claire. I opened it, and the photo made my stomach drop. Because standing beside my sister at the baby shower was a woman I recognized instantly. Margaret Holloway. At least, that's who they thought she was. Claire's caption read, "So honored that a famous art collector stopped by my baby shower today?" I slowly looked up at the real Margaret, standing right in front of me. And suddenly I realized something devastating. My family had just spent the entire day celebrating my sister, while unknowingly trying to impress the wrong woman. And when they discovered the truth, everything was about to explode. The next morning, I woke up with that weird, hollow feeling you get after an emotional hurricane. For a few seconds, I forgot everything. Then I saw the plane tickets on the nightstand. Savannah, Paris. First class. I bolted upright in bed. Ivan. He groaned into the pillow. We're going to Paris. That woke him up instantly. He turned toward me, hair a disaster, eyes still half asleep. Yeah, that wasn't a dream, right? I held up the tickets. Nope. For a moment we just stared at each other. Then we both burst out laughing. Because 24 hours earlier, we'd been standing in front of 35 empty wedding chairs wondering if our lives were falling apart. Now we were about to get on a plane to Europe. Life has a twisted sense of humor like that. I had never flown first class before. Honestly, I'd barely flown anywhere except cheap domestic flights. But when we boarded the plane, the flight attendant greeted us like we were celebrities. Mr. and Mrs. Carter. My heart did a little flip hearing that. Yes, Even said. She smiled warmly. Congratulations on your wedding. Miss Holloway asked us to take very good care of you. She handed us champagne before we even sat down. I leaned toward Evan. This feels illegal. He laughed quietly. Let's just enjoy it. But as the plane lifted off the runway, I couldn't stop thinking about my family. Not because I missed them. Because I wondered if they had any idea what they'd walked away from. I didn't know it yet. But around the same time our plane crossed the Atlantic, my sister's baby shower had just ended. And something had gone very, very wrong. Claire had been bragging all afternoon about the famous collector who attended her party. She told everyone Margaret Holloway loved the decorations, loved the food, loved the venue. Except it wasn't Margaret Holloway. It was just a local interior designer named Maggie Hollister. And someone eventually Googled the real Margaret. That's when things started unraveling. Because Margaret had posted something online that morning. A photo. From my wedding. Margaret's caption read, "Yesterday I witnessed one of the most intimate and authentic weddings I've ever attended. Congratulations to two extraordinary people, Emma and Evan Carter. The art world will know his name soon." Below it was a photo. Me in my thrift store lace dress, even kissing my forehead. Arthur standing behind us smiling. Within minutes, the comments exploded. Gallery owners, collectors, artists, people tagging friends, and one comment from a New York curator that read, "Is this the same Evan Carter whose portrait you just acquired?" Margaret replied, "Yes. His upcoming exhibition will be unforgettable." That single comment traveled faster than wildfire. And eventually, someone in my extended family saw it. Then someone sent it to my mother. Then my mother sent it to Claire. And that's when the panic began. When we landed in Paris, the sky looked like watercolor, soft pink clouds floating above the city. I pressed my face to the taxi window like a tourist cliché. I can't believe this is happening. Evan smiled at me. You deserve good things, Emma. I looked at him. We deserve good things. Our hotel was in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, old stone building. Tiny balcony, view of a narrow street lined with cafes. When we stepped into the room, I nearly cried. Because on the table was a bottle of champagne and a note. From Margaret. It read, "Paris has inspired every great artist at least once. I hope it inspires both of you." I sat on the bed in disbelief. This woman barely knows us. Even sat beside me. She knows art. Then he looked around the room thoughtfully. You know what's crazy? What? If your family had come to the wedding, we wouldn't be here. I smiled slowly. Best no show ever. That afternoon we were sitting at a sidewalk cafe eating croissants when my phone started vibrating nonstop. Group chat notifications. Dozens. I frowned. That's weird. I opened the messages. The family chat had exploded. Aunt Carol. Emma sweetie, can you call your mother? Cousin Derek. Wait, is your husband the artist from that article? Mom. Emma, please pick up the phone. Claire. What is going on? My stomach tightened. Ivan. He leaned closer. What? I turned the screen toward him. Someone had shared a link, an online art magazine article. The headline read, Rising Realism star Evan Carter signs with Holloway Contemporary. My heart nearly stopped. What? Evan grabbed the phone. Wait, this wasn't supposed to come out yet. The article described his upcoming exhibition. His work, his background, and one sentence that made my brain spin. Collectors are already predicting several pieces may sell for 6 figures. 6 figures. I looked at Evan slowly. You mean like over $100,000? He rubbed the back of his neck. Maybe. I burst out laughing. Not because it was funny, because it was completely insane. The messages get desperate. My phone buzzed again. Claire. I hesitated, then opened it. Claire. Emma, why didn't you tell us Evan was a big deal? I stared at the screen. Big deal. The same man they mocked at Thanksgiving, the same man my dad asked about getting a real job. My mother sent another message. Mom, sweetheart, we need to talk. Then another. Mom, your father feels terrible about missing the wedding. I looked up at Evan. He was watching my face carefully. You okay? I nodded slowly. Yeah. Then I typed something simple. One sentence. I'm on my honeymoon. Claire replied instantly. Where? I looked around the Paris cafe. The Eiffel Tower peeked above the rooftops in the distance. I smiled to myself. Then I sent a photo. Me and Evan clinking espresso cups. The Eiffel Tower behind us. Caption, Paris. The typing bubble appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally Claire sent 3 words. You're joking, right? I locked the phone. Because something inside me had shifted. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the overlooked sister. Not the backup daughter. Not the artsy failure, just Emma. And suddenly, my family wanted my attention, but they had no idea that the biggest shock of all was still coming. Because while we were drinking coffee in Paris, Margaret Holloway had just scheduled Evan's exhibition, and the guest list included some of the wealthiest collectors in America. Including one name. That would make my sister's husband panic. 3 days into our honeymoon in Paris, my phone started ringing again. Not buzzing, not texting, ringing, over and over. I stared at the screen while Evan and I sat on the balcony of our tiny hotel room, watching the early evening lights flicker across the streets of Saint Germain. Caller ID. Mom. I let it ring. Voicemail. Then it rang again, this time Dad. Then Claire. Then Ryan. I slowly lowered the phone onto the little iron cafe table beside my espresso. Evan raised an eyebrow. Family? Yep. You gonna answer? I shrugged. I didn't know I was suddenly so popular. Evan chuckled softly, but there was something cautious in his eyes. Emma, you don't have to talk to them if you're not ready. I know. Another call came through. Claire. Again, I leaned back in the chair and crossed my arms. 3 days ago. I said calmly. They had 0 interest in my wedding. Evan nodded. Now they want something? I sighed. Yeah. And deep down, I already knew what it was. Later that night, we were walking along the Seine River, street musicians playing soft jazz in the background, when Jenna texted me. Jenna, girl, your family is lossy TIR Mindis right now. I laughed. What? She immediately sent screenshots. Apparently the article about Evan had spread further than we thought. Major art blogs were sharing it, collectors were commenting. And someone had posted photos from our wedding. Including the one where Arthur walked me down the aisle, but the real explosion came from something else. Margaret Holloway had posted again. Her caption. Evan Carter's first exhibition with Holloway Contemporary will open in Manhattan this August. Private preview invitations will be extremely limited. Underneath that, one particular comment caught my eye, a verified account. Ryan Callahan. My brother-in-law, he wrote. Looking forward to supporting local talent. I blinked. Then burst out laughing. Evan, look at this. He leaned over my shoulder. When he saw the comment, his eyebrows shot up. Ryan Callahan. Your sister's husband. Yep. He rubbed his temples. That's weird. Not really. I smiled slowly. It's opportunistic. Because Ryan Callahan had never shown the slightest interest in Evan's art before, not once. The only time he ever talked to Evan was during that Thanksgiving dinner when he asked, "So how much do paintings like yours actually sell for?" The tone he used still made my skin crawl. Like he was calculating whether Evan was worth his time. Now suddenly, he wanted to be supportive. Interesting. But here's the twist. Ryan didn't just comment on the post. He also messaged Evan privately. Evan showed me the message when we got back to the hotel. Ryan, hey man, just saw the news about the exhibition. Huge congrats. We should catch up when you're back. I raised an eyebrow. Wow. He called you man. That's new. Evan smirked. Last time he called me kid. We both laughed. But then Evan scrolled down. Another message. Ryan again. Actually, I might have a business opportunity that could help both of us. That made Evan pause. What kind of opportunity? I asked. Evan shook his head slowly. I have no idea. But something about it made my stomach tighten. Because Ryan Callahan never did anything unless it benefited him. Ever. Ryan wasn't just rich, he was ambitious. Aggressively ambitious. His family's real estate company built luxury apartments across Atlanta. But recently, they'd been expanding. Big investments, big loans, big risks. And according to Jenna, whose boyfriend worked in finance, there were rumors. Some of Ryan's projects weren't doing as well as expected. Nothing public, just whispers. But whispers in business circles usually meant one thing: money problems. So when Ryan suddenly started messaging Evan, it made my instincts itch. That night, as we got ready for bed, my phone rang again. This time Dad. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I answered. Hello. There was a pause. Like he hadn't expected me to pick up. Emma. His voice sounded older somehow. How are you? I'm good. Where are you right now? Paris. Another pause. Oh. I could practically hear him recalculating the conversation in his head. That's wonderful. I waited. Eventually he cleared his throat. I saw the article about Evan. Yeah. That's quite something. Yeah. The silence stretched again. Finally he said the words I knew were coming. Your mother and I were wondering, when you get back, maybe we could have dinner. Dinner. Like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't skipped my wedding for a baby shower. Like 35 empty chairs never existed. I closed my eyes. Dad. Yes. You missed my wedding. I know. You chose Claire's party instead. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Another long pause. Then he said something that surprised me. I made a mistake. I didn't answer. He continued quietly. I'm sorry, Emma. The words felt strange coming from him, like hearing a dog suddenly start speaking English. But before I could respond, he added something else. And Ryan mentioned he might talk to Evan about a business idea. There it was. The real reason for the call. I opened my eyes slowly. Of course he did. What does that mean? It means Ryan didn't call because he feels bad? What do you mean? Ha called because he thinks Evan might make him money. Dad sounded offended. That's not fair, isn't it? He didn't answer. Because deep down, he knew I was right. While I was standing on a balcony in Paris talking to my father, Ryan Callahan was sitting in his home office staring at his laptop screen. On it was a spreadsheet, red numbers. Lots of them. His latest luxury condo project had just lost a major investor. He needed cash, fast. And that's when he saw the article about Evan, an artist about to sell paintings for 6 figures. Ryan leaned back in his chair slowly. Then he smiled. Because in his mind he had just found the perfect solution. Family. The next morning, Evan and I were walking through the Louvre courtyard when his phone buzzed. Another message from Ryan. This time it was longer. Ryan, I've been thinking about something big. Art investment is exploding right now. If Evan partners with my development company, we could create luxury gallery spaces in new properties. Could be millions involved. I read the message over Evan's shoulder. Then I looked at him. Millions. Evan frowned. I don't trust this. Neither do I. He locked the phone. Let's not worry about it right now. I nodded. But something inside me told me this was only the beginning. Because Ryan Callahan didn't give up easily, and when we returned to the United States, he was going to push harder. A lot harder. What he didn't realize was that the quiet artist he once mocked was about to become the most powerful person in the room. And when the truth about Ryan's finances came out, my family would finally learn something they should have known all along. Never underestimate the quiet ones. The night we got back from Paris, my parents suddenly wanted to throw a welcome home dinner, which was hilarious. Because 3 weeks earlier, they hadn't even shown up to my wedding. But now they were texting nonstop. My mom sent messages like, "Sweetheart, we missed you so much. Let's celebrate your marriage properly. Your father made reservations at Callahan Grill." Callahan Grill. Of course, my brother-in-law Ryan owned part of that restaurant chain. Even the dinner location felt like one of his business moves. Evan stood beside me in our Savannah apartment kitchen while I read the messages. "You don't have to go?" he said quietly. "I know." I looked at him, "But I want to." He tilted his head. "Why?" I shrugged. "Because I want to see their faces." He laughed under his breath. "Fair. But honestly, that wasn't the only reason. Something inside me wanted closure. Not forgiveness. Just truth." The restaurant was packed when we arrived. Big leather booths. Expensive whiskey behind the bar. Atlanta businessmen everywhere. When Evan and I walked in, I immediately spotted my family sitting at a large corner table. Mom, Dad, Claire, Ryan, a couple of cousins, and suddenly the entire table stood up like we were celebrities. Mom rushed over first. "Emma!" She hugged me tightly. Too tightly, like someone trying to erase a mistake with physical contact. "You look beautiful," she said. I smiled politely. "Thanks." Then Dad stepped forward. He hesitated before hugging me, like he wasn't sure he'd earned the right. "Good to see you, kiddo." Kiddo. I hadn't heard that word in months. Then Claire walked over slowly. Her pregnant belly showed beneath a designer dress. She gave me a careful smile. "Hi, Emma." "Hi." There was tension in the air thick enough to chew. Then Ryan stepped forward with a wide businessman grin. "Evan, my man." He shook Evan's hand enthusiastically. "I've been telling everyone about you." Evan nodded politely. "Thanks." Ryan gestured toward the table. "Let's sit." Big night. Big night. That phrase made my stomach twist. For the first 20 minutes, everyone acted like nothing had happened. They asked about Paris, the hotel, the museums. My mom even said, "Your honeymoon pictures looked amazing online." Which meant she had been watching my Instagram, despite never liking or commenting. Classic mom. Then the waiter poured wine. Ryan raised his glass. "I'd like to make a toast." "Here we go. To Emma and Evan," he said loudly. "To new beginnings, incredible success and family sticking together." Family. I almost choked on my wine, but the real moment came right after the toast. Ryan leaned back in his chair and looked directly at Evan. "So," he said casually, "let's talk about that exhibition." The table went quiet. Evan wiped his mouth with a napkin. "It's in August. I heard collectors are already fighting over pieces. Margaret says there's interest." Ryan grinned. "Oh, there's more than interest." Then he pulled out his phone. "I did some research." He turned the screen toward Evan. An article. Headlined, "Why Contemporary Realism is the Fastest Growing Art Investment Market." Ryan tapped the screen. "Investors are pouring money into artists like you." Evan nodded slowly. "That's nice." Ryan leaned forward. "That's opportunity." I could feel the pitch coming. Ryan clasped his hands like a CEO about to unveil a new startup. "My company is launching several luxury residential towers in Atlanta," he said. "Each building will feature a curated art gallery. Evan listened quietly. Ryan continued. We partner with rising artists early. My stomach tightened. Because suddenly I understood. Ryan wasn't celebrating Evan, he was trying to own a piece of him. What kind of partnership? Evan asked calmly. Ryan smiled. You become the flagship artist for our gallery spaces. And? Ryan's eyes gleamed. And we handle sales, promotion, and investor relationships. And? Ryan leaned back. We take 30%. I nearly laughed out loud. 30%, even I knew galleries typically took less. But Evan didn't react, he simply asked one question. Why me? Ryan spread his arms. Because you're family. There it was again. That word, family. The same family that skipped our wedding. Evan looked around the table slowly. My parents watched him nervously. Claire looked curious. Ryan looked confident. Then Evan said something very simple. I already have representation. Ryan waved a hand dismissively. Yeah, Holloway Contemporary. That's great exposure. Exposure. I saw Evan's jaw tighten slightly. Ryan continued. But what I'm offering is real scale. Evan folded his hands. Margaret handles scale. Ryan laughed. You're thinking too small. That's when Evan finally said the sentence that changed the entire mood of the table. She's already sold 3 pieces. Ryan stopped smiling. 3. Evan nodded. Before the exhibition. My mom blinked. For how much? Evan hesitated. Then he said it calmly. 200,000 each. The entire table went silent. My father's fork literally clattered onto his plate. Claire's mouth fell open. Ryan's face turned pale. 200 each. Dad whispered. Evan nodded. And that's just the starting price. The room felt like the air had been sucked out, because suddenly the numbers Ryan had imagined controlling were far bigger than he expected. Much bigger. Ryan recovered quickly. Too quickly. Okay, he said with forced enthusiasm. Even better. That means our partnership could be worth millions. Evan shook his head. I'm not interested. Ryan blinked. What? I'm not interested. Ryan's smile disappeared. You didn't even hear the full proposal. I heard enough. The tension at the table exploded. Claire leaned forward. Evan, Ryan is just trying to help. I looked at her slowly. Like you helped by scheduling your baby shower on my wedding day. The table froze. Claire's face flushed. That wasn't intentional. I raised an eyebrow. Sir. Ryan cut in quickly. Let's not revisit old drama. Old drama. I laughed softly. You mean my wedding? Dad looked miserable. Mom stared at her wine glass. And Ryan. Ryan leaned toward Evan with a new expression. Less friendly. More desperate. You're making a mistake. He said quietly. Evan met his eyes calmly. I don't think so. The dinner ended awkwardly after that. But as we stood up to leave, something strange happened. Ryan pulled Evan aside near the restaurant entrance. I watched from a distance. Their conversation was quiet, tense. Then Evan walked back to me with a strange look on his face. What did he say? I asked. Evan hesitated. Then he spoke quietly. He asked if I'd consider loaning him money. My stomach dropped. What? Evan nodded. He said one of his projects hit a temporary cash flow problem. I stared across the restaurant. Ryan stood at the bar pretending everything was fine, but suddenly the whispers Jenna mentioned made sense. The investments, the loans, the risky developments. Ryan Callahan wasn't trying to partner with Evan, he was trying to save himself. And the scariest part, my family had no idea. But they would soon, because the next week, a financial scandal was about to hit Atlanta real estate. And when it did, Ryan Callahan's name would be right at the center of it. The morning the scandal broke, I was sitting on our living room floor in Savannah, surrounded by half-finished canvases, drinking coffee out of a chipped mug that said World's Okayest Artist's Wife. Evan had bought it for me in a tourist shop in Paris. It was stupid. And perfect. He was across the room painting, soft jazz playing through the speakers, sunlight spilling through the big warehouse windows. For the first time in weeks, life felt calm. Then my phone buzzed. Jenna, girl, turn on the news. That was never a good message. I opened the link she sent. The headline made my stomach drop. A talento de lo parvober en vista de la fire misdine vistor fendes. Underneath the headline was a photo. Ryan Callahan, my brother-in-law, I slowly sat up straighter. Ivan. He didn't look away from the canvas. Yeah. You need to see this? He walked over, wiping paint off his hands with a rag. I turned the phone toward him. His eyebrows rose immediately. Well, that escalated quickly. The report wasn't vague, it was brutal. Apparently, one of Ryan's luxury condo developments had been using money from a second investment project to cover construction delays, which meant investors from Project B were unknowingly funding Project A. And now both projects were running out of cash. If the numbers were correct, Ryan's company was nearly $18 million in the hole. I felt cold all over. Holy. Evan whistled softly. That's bad. Really bad. Because this wasn't just a rumor anymore. This was financial news. And when financial news like this hit the internet, banks notice, lawyers notice, and investors start calling. My phone started vibrating nonstop. Mom, Dad, Claire. Again and again, I looked at Evan. Well, guess they want to talk now? He sighed. You okay? Honestly. I leaned back against the couch. I feel like I'm watching a car crash in slow motion. Eventually I answered one call. Mom. Her voice was shaky. Emma. Hi, Mom. Have you seen the news? Yes. A pause. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. Ryan said Evan might be able to help. I closed my eyes. There it was again. Not are you okay? Not how are you feeling? Just money. What kind of help? I asked quietly. Well, Ryan says Evan's paintings are selling for a lot of money. My chest tightened. So. He thought maybe Evan could invest. Invest. I laughed out loud, not kindly. Mom. Yes. You skipped my wedding. Emma. And now you're asking my husband to bail out your favorite son-in-law. She sounded desperate. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. She started crying. Which normally would have destroyed me. But this time, it didn't, because something inside me had changed. An hour later, Claire called. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Emma, she said immediately. You need to talk to Ivan. I'm literally sitting next to him. Good. Her voice sounded tight. Ryan just needs a short-term bridge loan. I blinked. A what? Just a few million until investors calm down. I burst out laughing. A few million. Claire sounded offended. You don't have to mock us. Claire. Evan doesn't just keep a few $1,000,000 in his couch cushions. Well, Margaret does. Ah. There it was. The real plan. You want Evan to ask Margaret for money. I said. Yes. Claire sounded relieved that I finally understood. It would save Ryan's company. I stood up slowly. You mean the company that treated Evan like a joke at Thanksgiving? That was years ago. Actually, it was 8 months ago. Claire's voice sharpened. You're being selfish. Selfish. That word hit like a slap. Selfish. I repeated quietly. You're my sister. Family helps family. My chest tightened. Did family help me when 35 empty chairs showed up to my wedding? Claire said nothing. Because we both knew the answer. Later that afternoon, Evan's phone rang. Ryan. Evan looked at me. You want me to answer? I nodded. He put it on speaker. Ryan sounded different this time. No confident businessman voice, just stressed. Ivan, man, I know this is awkward. Yeah, Ivan said calmly. But I need help. With what exactly? Ryan exhaled heavily. If this story keeps spreading, investors will panic. Okay. If I can secure 10 million quickly, I can stabilize everything. 10 million, my brain nearly shut down. And you think I have that? Ivan asked. No, but Margaret might. Silence filled the room. Ryan continued quickly. If you introduce me, I'll handle the rest. Evan's voice stayed calm. I'm not doing that. Ryan's tone hardened. Why not? Because Margaret represents me. So I don't use my professional relationships to fix someone else's mistakes. Ryan snapped. This isn't just someone else. It's family. Evan paused. Then he said something that stunned me. I went to your house for Thanksgiving. Ryan didn't answer. You laughed when my paintings sold for $500. Ryan stayed silent. You asked Emma when I'd get a real job. Still silence. So no. Even finished quietly. I'm not risking my career to clean up your mess. Ryan hung up, just like that. By evening, the family group chat was exploding. Claire accused us of abandoning them. My dad sent long messages about loyalty. My mom begged everyone to stay calm. But something had finally snapped inside me. For years I had played the quiet sister, the accommodating one, the one who didn't make waves. Not anymore. I opened the chat and typed one sentence. You didn't treat Evan like family until you needed his money. Then I muted the conversation. 2 days later, someone knocked on our apartment door. When I opened it, Claire stood there. Pregnant. Tired. Eyes red from crying. She looked smaller somehow. Like the confident older sister I'd always known had cracked. Emma, she said softly. What are you doing here? She stepped inside slowly. I need to talk to you. Evan appeared behind me. Claire glanced at him nervously. Can we talk alone? I looked at Evan. He squeezed my shoulder. Then walked into the kitchen. Claire sat down on the couch. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then she whispered something I never expected to hear. I'm scared. I sat across from her. Of what? Her eyes filled with tears. Of losing everything. And suddenly, the sister who had always seemed perfect, didn't look perfect anymore. She looked human. Broken, desperate. But what she asked next would force me to make the hardest decision of my life. I'm scared. Those were the first real words my sister had spoken to me in years, not the polished Instagram version of Claire. Not the confident country club version. Just scared. She sat on our worn gray couch in the middle of our Savannah apartment, clutching her purse like it was the only thing holding her together. For a moment I just stared at her, because I had spent most of my life believing Claire Mitchell had everything under control. Perfect hair, perfect house, perfect husband, perfect life. Now she looked like someone whose entire world had just cracked open. What do you mean you're scared? I asked quietly. Claire wiped her eyes. Ryan's situation is worse than the news is saying. I leaned back slowly. How much worse? She swallowed. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. A lot worse. Claire opened her purse and pulled out a folded stack of papers, bank documents, loan statements, legal notices. She placed them on the coffee table between us. I picked one up. My heart started racing as I scanned the page. Because the numbers didn't say own 18 million, they said something else. 47 million. I blinked. What is this? Claire stared at the floor. Ryan's company owes $47 million. My chest felt tight. That's impossible. He borrowed against multiple developments. For what? She hesitated, trying to keep the earlier projects alive. I stared at her. So he kept borrowing money to cover older loans. She nodded slowly. My mind struggled to process it. That's not a business strategy, Claire. Her voice cracked. I know. Then she whispered the word I'd been thinking. It's a collapse. I looked down at the documents again. Lawyers, banks, emergency funding requests. This wasn't just messy. This was catastrophic. How did it get this bad? I asked. Claire closed her eyes. Because Ryan kept thinking the next deal would fix everything. That sounded exactly like Ryan. Always chasing the bigger opportunity. The bigger win. The bigger risk. But then Claire said something that made my blood run cold. He used our house as collateral. My head snapped up. You're kidding. She shook her head. If the company fails, we lose everything. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest all day. So why are you really here? Claire looked at me like she hated the answer. Because Ryan thinks Evan could save us. There it was. Again, Evan, not Emma. Evan. At that moment Evan stepped out of the kitchen holding 3 cups of coffee. He placed one in front of Claire. You okay? Claire nodded weakly. Thank you. Evan sat beside me. What's going on? I slid the papers toward him. His eyes widened as he read. 47 million. Claire nodded. He leaned back slowly. That's catastrophic. She started crying again. I know. Then she looked at him. Directly. Ryan thinks if Margaret invests in one of the projects. Evan shook his head immediately. No. Claire looked desperate. You didn't even hear the rest. I don't need to. Please. Her voice cracked. Just listen. Evan hesitated, then nodded slightly. Okay. Claire wiped her eyes. Ryan has one development that's almost finished. What kind? Evan asked. Luxury condos. Evan nodded slowly. If someone invests $10 million now, the building can be completed. And then. Claire's voice softened with hope. Ryan says the units would sell for $80 million total. I frowned. That sounds like a gamble. It is. Evan leaned forward. And if the units don't sell? Claire didn't answer. Because we all knew the answer. Bankruptcy. Lawsuits. Total financial ruin. After a few minutes, Evan stood up. I'm going to give you two some space. When he walked back into the kitchen, Claire looked at me again. Emma, I know we haven't always been close. That was the understatement of the century. But I need help. I crossed my arms. What kind of help? Talk to Evan. I'm not manipulating my husband. I'm not asking you to manipulate him. She leaned forward. I'm asking you to ask. I stared at her. Why should we risk our future for Ryan? Claire's eyes filled with tears again. Because if he loses everything, so do I. And she touched her stomach. And so does my baby. That hit differently. Because suddenly this wasn't just about Ryan. It was about a child who hadn't even been born yet. I looked at Claire for a long moment. Then I said something I'd never said out loud before. You always got everything first. She blinked. What? Mom and Dad's attention. That's not true. Yes, it is. I stood up slowly. When you wanted a car in high school, Dad bought one. That's not fair. When I wanted art school, they said it was a waste of money. Claire looked stunned. I didn't know that. Of course you didn't. My voice softened. Because everything always worked out for you. She wiped her face again. It doesn't feel like that right now. For the first time in my life, my perfect sister looked completely lost. And suddenly I realized something. She wasn't the villain I'd built in my head. She was just someone who had always lived inside a system that favored her. Until now. Evan eventually came back into the room. Claire looked at him nervously. Did Emma explain everything? He nodded. I understand the situation. Hope flashed across her face. So will you help? Evan sat down calmly. Then he said the words that changed everything. I can't ask Margaret for money. Claire's face fell instantly. But. He raised a finger gently. That doesn't mean there's nothing I can do. Claire leaned forward. What do you mean? Evan looked thoughtful. My exhibition opens in 6 weeks. Yes. Margaret expects strong sales. Claire's breathing quickened. And if the numbers are what she predicts, I might have some money to invest myself. Claire gasped. Really? But Evan continued carefully. I would only invest if the project is financially sound. Claire nodded rapidly. Ryan can show you the numbers? Evan gave a small smile. Good. Then he stood up. Because if the numbers aren't honest. His voice became firm. I won't touch it. Claire nodded again. I understand. But something in her eyes made my stomach twist. Because for the first time, I wondered if Ryan had actually shown her the real numbers, or just the version he wanted her to believe. And if Evan discovered the truth, the fallout wouldn't just destroy Ryan's company. It might destroy my entire family. The night of Evan's exhibition in New York City, I realized something strange. My family had spent most of my life making me feel small, but walking into that gallery I had never felt bigger. The building sat on a quiet street in Soho, glowing with warm light behind huge glass windows. Inside, the walls were filled with Evan's paintings. Massive, breathtaking portraits and city scenes that looked so real you felt like you could step into them. People were already crowding the room. Collectors, critics, gallery owners, women in black dresses holding champagne flutes, men in expensive suits discussing brushwork like it was stock market analysis. And right in the middle of it all was Evan. Calm, quiet, talking to Margaret Holloway like this was just another Tuesday night. I leaned against the wall watching him. 6 months ago, my family thought he was a struggling artist. Tonight, people were whispering his name like he was the future of contemporary realism. Margaret noticed me and walked over with a smile. Emma, she said warmly, you must be proud. I am. She glanced across the room at Evan. "I've represented artists for 30 years," she said quietly, "and I rarely see this kind of reaction." "What kind?" She nodded toward the paintings. "Collectors fighting over them." My stomach fluttered. "Already?" She smiled. "4 sold before the doors even opened." I blinked. "For how much?" Margaret's eyes sparkled. 280,000 each. For a moment the room spun. Over $1 million already. And the show had just started. About an hour later, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Emma." I turned. My parents stood there. Dad looked uncomfortable in a suit. Mom looked nervous but hopeful. And behind them, Claire. 7 months pregnant now. Ryan stood beside her, face tight, scanning the gallery like a man trying to read a room that didn't welcome him. I hadn't invited them. Margaret must have. Or maybe they begged their way onto the guest list. Dad cleared his throat. "This place is impressive." "Yeah," I said. Mom glanced around nervously. "Your husband is very talented." Claire stepped forward slowly. "Congratulations, Emma." "Thanks." Ryan finally spoke. "So where's the star of the show?" I pointed across the gallery. Evan was laughing with 2 collectors near one of his cityscape paintings. Ryan watched him carefully, like a businessman evaluating an asset. It made my stomach twist. Later that night, Evan joined us near the back of the gallery. "Hey," he said warmly when he saw my parents. "Thanks for coming." Dad nodded awkwardly. "Wouldn't miss it." Claire looked nervous. "So how's the show going?" Evan smiled. "Well, 10 paintings sold." Ryan's head snapped up. 10. Margaret walked over at that moment. "Actually 11 now," she said. Ryan looked stunned. "And the prices?" Margaret answered calmly. "Between 280 and 300,000. Silence. You could practically hear Ryan's brain calculating the numbers. Because if 11 paintings sold at those prices, that was over $3 million. Ryan leaned toward Evan slightly. "So about that investment conversation." Evan's expression shifted. Calm, professional. "I reviewed the documents your company sent." Ryan stiffened. "And?" Evan glanced at Claire briefly, then back at Ryan. "The numbers don't work." Ryan forced a smile. "What do you mean?" Evan's voice stayed gentle. "The projected condo sales are unrealistic." Ryan's jaw tightened. "That's just your opinion." Evan shook his head. "No, it's the market data." Ryan leaned closer. "You're making a mistake?" "No." Evan's voice remained calm. "I'm protecting my investment." Ryan's face darkened. "You're really going to let family drown?" That word again. Family, and suddenly something inside me snapped. I stepped forward. "Don't do that." Ryan looked at me. "Do what?" "Pretend this is about family." Claire whispered my name. But I kept going. "You didn't treat Evan like family." Ryan rolled his eyes. "Oh, here we go." "No," I said firmly. "You laughed at him." I pointed around the gallery. "You mocked his career." I pointed at myself. "You skipped our wedding." My voice shook slightly. "But now that he's successful, suddenly we're family again." Ryan opened his mouth, but my father spoke first. "She's right." Everyone froze. Dad looked at Ryan with a tired expression. "You treated Evan like a joke." Ryan snapped. "I built a real company and lost $47 million doing it," Dad said quietly. Claire gasped. "Dade." "I saw the real financial report," he continued. Ryan's face went pale. Because suddenly the truth wasn't a secret anymore. Ryan looked at Evan one last time. "So that's it?" Evan nodded. "That's it." Ryan turned toward Claire. "Let's go." But Claire didn't move. Instead she looked at me and whispered something I never expected to hear. "I'm sorry." My chest tightened. "For what?" I asked softly. "For everything." Her voice cracked. "The wedding. The way I treated you growing up. I thought I was better than you." She wiped her eyes. "But tonight." She looked around the gallery, filled with people admiring Evan's work. "I finally see who the strong one was." For a moment neither of us spoke, then I hugged her. Because sometimes forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs it. Ryan walked out alone. Claire stayed. By the end of the night, every painting had sold. The gallery was buzzing. Collectors were asking Evan about future work. Margaret whispered something to him that made his eyes widen. Later he told me what it was. 3 museums want pieces, he said quietly. I laughed. Are you serious? Apparently. We stood outside the gallery after midnight, New York lights glowing around us. Evan wrapped his arm around my shoulders. You okay? I looked up at the city skyline. Yeah. For the first time in my life, I felt peaceful. Because success hadn't just changed our future, it had changed something deeper. For years I believed my family's approval defined my worth, but standing there in the cool New York air, watching strangers celebrate the man I loved, I finally understood something. The people who skip your wedding don't get front row seats to your success. And sometimes, the life you build without them becomes the most beautiful masterpiece of all.